Good morning from Moscow, everyone. It's Thursday, the 28th of May, and today's Russian papers report on a fuel shortage in Russia. Nezavisimaya Gazeta writes, the number of Russian regions with restrictions on the sale of fuel is multiplying. In a number of regions, restrictions are being imposed on fuel sales. Restrictions on the sale of AI-95 petrol were introduced in several districts of the Kostroma region. Restrictions at some petrol stations in the Tver region. Problems with fuel have been observed in the Magadan and Murmansk regions. So why is this happening? Well, the paper gives this explanation. One of the reasons for the shortage problem is unscheduled repairs at oil refineries. Due to unscheduled repairs, a number of refineries reduced fuel sales in May. About 1/5 of all refining capacities in the country is affected. Western news agencies report that almost all major refineries in central Russia were forced to suspend or reduce fuel production. Their combined share in fuel production is more than 30% for petrol and about 25% for diesel. No reason given yet in the article for these unscheduled repairs, which you would imagine is linked to recent Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian oil facilities. But this does get a brief mention later on in the article. First, it states that the Russian authorities emphasize that the domestic market is replete with fuel, and that last week the Energy Ministry again assured that Russia's fuel industry is fully prepared for the period of seasonal rise in demand for petrol and diesel fuel as planned. The Kremlin too did not see any risks with the provision of fuel, including as a result of drone strikes on refineries. So their drones do get a mention. The paper adds, the situation in the domestic fuel market remains tense. The rise in petrol prices exceeds general inflation in the country. Izvestia too goes big on the story and claims that the government is discussing the possibility of restrictions on the export not only of petrol but also of diesel and jet fuel. From petrol to gas, and problems for Europe as depicted by this cartoon. The paper claims that even if the war in the Middle East ends, European countries will be forced to buy gas at inflated prices for at least half a year. In the next 6 months, gas prices in Europe may rise by another 20 to 30% amid competition with Asia for available LNG shipments. Back to Russia, and Moskovsky Komsomolets reports that in a number of Russian currency exchanges, there is a lack of cash dollars and euros. So far, the situation cannot be called a shortage, but if the alarming trend continues, then such a scenario cannot be excluded. This gentleman, with all these dollars, is saying, come on, where on earth are you hiding? RBK reports that in Russia, in May, the price of fruits and vegetables is falling by 2 to 3% a week. But the paper also talks about worrying signals. For example, prices of services continue to rise fast. Now, there's an interesting editorial in today's Nezavisimaya Gazeta, which is entitled, Our Dependence on Western Technologies and the Concern of the Intelligence Agencies. The director of the FSB, Alexander Bortnikov, said the other day that the recent elimination by the US and Israel of members of Iran's top leadership is an alarming signal, since the coordinates of the victims' locations were obtained, among other things, via software bookmarks in video monitoring systems in Tehran. This has sparked fears that unfriendly states can penetrate the most important systems, including those responsible for Russia's security, via installed software and chips. The heads of the Russian special services have been saying for a long time that state purchases of foreign software should be limited. All for the same security reasons. But the writer is against the idea of rejecting Western technologies and warns that radical steps lead to absurdity. If you can't fully trust technology, if you view any innovation as machinations of enemies, then you need to pull the plug on lots of things, for example, on the internet or the storage of data in computers in government agencies. Typewriters, secretaries with folders, a strict access control system, all of this will protect data of special importance. You can get rid of CCTV cameras in cities if the enemy can use them to track the movements of high-ranking officials. This will automatically lead to an increase in crime, but it will certainly reduce dependence on the West. You can develop this idea endlessly. Forgo mobile communications, return to landlines, turn off communications altogether, cut off electricity, and so on. We're having to mention these absurd arguments since the state in Russia sets the priorities in this way: security first, and only then the comfort of modern life and convenience for the modern economy. It's easier to convince society of the need for such a hierarchy when the threat is obvious, for example when drones are heading your way. Voluntary technological decline and the rejection of convenience can help ensure security in the short term, but society itself doesn't just stop developing, it drops several levels lower and once again finds itself at the stage when normal, ordinary things and amenities become luxury. Finally, beware of bears, which have been spotted on the roads in Moscow region. Moskovsky Komsomolets has this advice if you come face to face with a bear: don't panic, don't run, retreat slowly, make yourself look big, don't approach bear cubs, don't leave rubbish. A joke is doing the rounds in social networks in Moscow region. If you bump into a bear in the forest, at least you won't need to worry anymore about ticks.